Hi, English 10. I'm going to do an annotation of the poem, The Human Condition, and you'll use this annotation to deepen your understanding as you go into writing your paragraph after this. So the first step that I make when I am going to do a deeper analysis of text is that I make sure I read it aloud or listen to it read. And you can do that in the Pear Deck slides by looking at the bottom corner of the slide on the right side where there is a little link to me reading this poem out loud. Next, I want to make sure that I understand the language of the poem, just to get like that surface level meaning of what is this poem saying that it's about. This is a complicated poem with a lot of deeper meaning. And so we're going to explore the way that the author provides multiple meanings in one stanza. One of the first things that students have asked about this poem is the word iris, and if that's a term that you just know it's in the eye, the specific part of the eye is that it's in the colored part of the eye around the pupil. And he references that the color of the iris, and so I think that's an important word to understand. Another one that students have asked about is multiplicity. And we can use that word part multiply basically to understand like, okay, this means that there are many mirrors, so that there are many parts. So once I have like the words down, my next step is going to be looking at the stanzas more deeply and trying to pick out concrete details. So especially when you read something with old-fashioned language or that's really packed and dense, like this poem is, I find that to be really helpful. So we're going to use I think we'll underline. So we'll use a pen here. Okay. So I think the concrete details here would be like the people, places, and things he's talking about that seem really important. We know already that eyes have been repeated, so I'm going to underline those. That seems like an important detail. He talks about bodies and machines and eye. So I'm going to get this concept up here. This eye is one of the human machines. He talks about then this idea of machine, but he's using a juxtaposition here, a comparison with flesh. So machine's made out of mechanical parts, but he is made out of flesh. So now up here, he's comparing this idea of machines versus humans. And then in the second part of the stanza, he starts like another comparison. And I think right here, he's talking about how there are many humans, many human machines, but each human has this like singular perception, this singular universe that they can experience through one set of eyes. So this comparison of singular human experience versus shared physical, HY, physical characteristics of humanity. Okay, we'll say it that way. So he's talking about how like kind of our bodies are the same, but we have these different experiences that we see through our single pair of eyes. So then I'm going to keep going, looking into the second stanza then, looking again for like concrete details. So he's talking about the city, that in specific, this idea of traffic, And traffic here could be like a metaphor, right? He's saying the traffic of the street roars through my head. So there's a literal thought of like it's noisy, but there's also a metaphorical thought of like he's thinking about something, and the traffic of his thoughts or the noise of his thoughts is roaring in his head. And then he compares it. This is a simile here using like or as. And this comparison is to unborn babies, like I guess the traffic of unborn children that are potential in people's bodies. And he's saying that it's London. It's the unborn London. We can assume then probably like he lives in London. So then going on to the next stanza, I would say, he's like repeating this idea of I, and now he's adding the idea of destruction. So he talks about if this I were destroyed. Again, comparing an eye, like a single person, to their eyeball, the image is being compared there. So that's, I would say, another metaphor. My perceived rent world would fly in an explosion of final judgment. An interesting thing about the word rent is that, it means to borrow. So he's saying my perception is borrowed, and that would fly apart, basically. Rent also means like ripped. So it has this kind of double meaning again of like, it's borrowed, but it also means it's ripping apart. Finally, this is my favorite part of the poem. He says, to the ends of the sky. So his perception would like blow apart and explode to the ends of the sky, the color of the iris of the eye. And this, I think, is a really deep idea that his idea of the world and his experience is literally colored, like it literally is the color of his eye. Like his perception is so rooted in his physical body that it defines what he sees. Okay, so let's label some of these metaphors. We've got metaphor of how complicated we are. And we've got thoughts compared. Actually, this is a simile, right? Thoughts as a simile for unborn children. And then down here, we've got this second comparison. Thoughts are so rooted in our bodies that the color of our eyes is the color of our sky. I think that's such a cool idea. Okay, so then this last part, a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe feel down here. He's saying, when I'm awake, I create the light, or I perceive God's light. I'm not sure which. There's definitely an allusion to the Bible, let there be light. And then there's, I guess, the reminder of his mortality. Like he didn't really create the light, he just experienced it, because when his eyes are closed, it's like he's dead, whether he's sleeping or actually has passed away. So in this last stanza, we have this idea of allusion to Bible, but maybe that's almost like a juxtaposition there with mortality. Okay. So with all this in mind, this is a time for you to stop and go answer those questions in the Pear Deck. What is this poem really about? What's the central idea that he's saying? I think he has some really interesting ideas, and I look forward to reading yours. Thank you.